Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. It's 3 p.m. in the UK and it's 10 a.m. Eastern, and you're all most welcome to join us here at 0 Days Live. It's the start of another week, and I hope you all had a great Easter break doing whatever you were doing. Now, even though it is a shorter week this week, we are packing lots in again into all of our live shows, starting with today, where in a few moments I'll be joined by today's special guest, Mark Oakton, who is Director and Chief Information Security Officer of Infosec Partners, and he'll be talking to us about critical national infrastructure security. Now, firstly, a quick apology from me. For those of you that may have inadvertently received an invite to join us on the Friday or Monday show, our overzealous virtual assistant sent those out, and given it was the Easter break, they obviously didn't happen. But fear not, as we are cramming lots into our 4-day week this week, including tomorrow, where we will be meeting with Richard Starnes, who is the Chief Security Strategist at Capgemini, followed by Michael Osterman, founder of Osterman Research, who'll be talking to us about some of the government-focused reports they've been conducting. He'll be with us on Thursday. And on Friday, we have not one, but two very special guests. A return of Simon Staffel from Nominet, and also joining us will be Tom Field, who is with Information Security Media Group, or ISMG, where we will be celebrating, of all things, virtually at least, National Cheese Ball Day. So don't miss that. Now, most of you will know this already, but a quick introduction from me. My name's Stuart Reed, and I'm with Nominet, focused on cyber solutions. And you may be familiar with Nominet being responsible for managing the .uk domain, which we've been doing for over 23 years now, with something in the order of 15 million domains under our management. Now, in addition, and building on experience of domains and the DNS or domain name system, we also provide cybersecurity solutions to protect both government and enterprise networks worldwide from cyber attacks, including providing service to the UK government's National Cybersecurity Centre. And at Nominet, ensuring people are able to be connected, included, and secure is at the heart of what we do. And in these unprecedented times, we are seeing physical events, socials, and face-to-face meetings being halted. And so we thought we would bring you a webcast, which we hope in some small way acts to reconnect people, albeit virtually, that are either within or have an interest in cybersecurity. And we're keeping things here at 0 Days Live really quite simple. We want to create a community where we can hear from others in the industry, get a roundup of what's going on in the news, and share some thoughts on best practice, and also, of course, interject some good humour. But most importantly, we want your involvement too. So during today's show and throughout any of the other live shows that you join, you'll notice a console on your screen that has the ability to ask questions or provide comments to us. So please do use it. Any questions you do have today, please just ask them and we'll read them out during today's webcast. Now, as regulars of this show will know, it's all very authentic here. And whilst we are generally running for about 30 minutes or so each day, there are no hard and fast rules here. But of course, because we are live, anything could and probably will happen. And should that happen, we hope you agree it's just part of the richness of the show. But we're not just live, you'll be pleased to know. We are here for your convenience on demand too. Each and every show can be found at nominetcyber.com 0 Days Live, which is the same webpage you signed up from. So it really couldn't be easier. Now, as with every show, we are joined by a great team, both joining me here in the virtual studio and also behind the scenes, plus special guests joining us each and every day. But of course, we can't do it without you. So thank you so much for joining us here at 0 Days Live. Each day we welcome new people to our growing virtual community, and we really do appreciate you making the time for us. Last week, we wanted to know a burning question. How do our guests and how do you tuning in take your tea? This week's big question is, what are you missing most from the office? For me, the answer is really simple. It's these, it's Post-it notes or self-adhesive, tacky, reusable note paper, as others might like to call them. I use them all the time, and my usual plentiful supply for all things work related, of course, is becoming depleted, as you can see. Now, Steve, where are you?
Oh, here I am. Hi, Stuart.
Excellent. A bit delayed there, Steve, but welcome back from the Easter break. I hope you had a good time.
I did, thank you. I was busy playing the weekend with my plentiful bunch of post-it notes that I took from the office for work purposes, of course, before we got put into lockdown. So just let me know if you need any, because I've got plenty.
Well, it makes me feel comforted to know that somebody has a plentiful supply should I need them. And as I said, I am getting quite thin on the ground, so I probably will very soon. So more importantly, what are you most missing from the office? Clearly not post-it notes.
Not post-it notes. I'm missing the big whiteboards. You know, they were fantastic for brainstorming and for kind of just jotting ideas down. I don't have the benefit of that in my house. I tried to write on the walls, but realised they're not wipe clean. So I'm in a bit of trouble because I tried that. So that's what I'm really missing, is the ability to write on the walls, really.
Yeah, I can empathise with that. There's nothing like writing in big letters on the walls. Totally agree. Kerry, welcome back from Easter.
Hello, happy Tuesday.
Thank you very much, and likewise. What are you missing from the office, Kerry?
Well, unlike you guys, I have chalk pens and I have lots of mirrors in front of me here, so I can get creative, do marketing, write big all over the walls of my conservatory. So I'm covered in that area. But the thing I am missing most from the office is the pre-made lunches. So the fridge downstairs is one of those self-serve honesty box kind of setups. Was getting a little bit tired and I was a bit bored of the lunches. And now I would give anything for a chicken and bacon sandwich out of that fridge.
Well, there we go. A rare insight into your everyday life there, Kerry. I'm sure everyone at home will be pleased to have witnessed that. So thank you very much. And also everyone at home, please do let us know what you're missing from the office as well. Just type that into your console screen. And now, right on cue, and as I mentioned just a few moments ago, today we are lucky enough to be joined by Mark Oakton, Director and Chief Information Security Officer of Infosec Partners. Very warm welcome to you, Mark. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon. Good to be here. Thank you.
Good stuff. Now, first things first, you've heard that there are some burning questions that we ask here every week. What are you missing most from the office?
Oh, my office, two big things for me, really. One, the first, kind of obvious. We're used to thinking, we've got a custom security threat, let's go and grab some kit and make a custom sensor and build it together, and then we can roll it out next day. Well, I turn around and there's nothing here, so that's a challenge. But the big thing I miss, there's this van that comes to our office every morning, right? It's got sandwiches in it. Most people buy sandwiches. They do this metal box, weighs about the same as 3 bricks, and it's breakfast in a box. And every day I say, I'm not having one of those. I'm not having one. I'll have nothing. Every day the van turns up and I think last time, and I go and get one. I haven't got the breakfast brick in a box at home, which I miss.
But you've got the self-discipline there at least now, so I suppose that's something.
Yeah, I'm just storing it up. They owe me.
Excellent. And for the benefit of everyone tuning in today and joining us, Mark, can you give us just a quick overview of Infosec Partners and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, sure. So Infosec Partners, we started 15 years ago. Long time ago now. Started off security consulting, every area of cyber. So we do absolutely everything from investigations to security research to testing to secure infrastructures and managed cyber services. So we do a lot in kind of IT, OT space. Obviously a lot of CNI work. So we've done airports and governments and boats and planes and manufacturing, anywhere where it's complex. My passion is kind of where you used to have 2 separate networks and areas and 2 different groups of people pretending there was a separate environment, and now they've kind of all agreed it's not really, it's all one big mess. Whether that's CNI or closely related to CNI, we offer protection services around those.
Okay, great. And today, of course, we are talking about securing critical national infrastructure. So I guess firstly, the primary question for us all to understand is what do we mean by critical national infrastructure? So in a nutshell, what does it mean to you, Mark?
So critical national infrastructure are those services which help the nation to exist and function. Really, we're not functioning particularly well at the moment, but areas around communication, nuclear, food, finance, anything that helps us live, survive, and the nation and the state to operate, whether it's government owned or more usually private sector, that is critical to us living, how we're used to living, is critical national infrastructure, and they need to abide by certain rules. Telecommunication, for example, TV, radio isn't really thought of as critical national infrastructure, but the first thing a terrorist will try and do potentially is compromise the communication systems to put out a bad message. It's not something people would generally be looking for because they're looking at the crown jewels in the center. But if you're a bad guy and you want to get a bad message out to lots of people, that's a very good medium to attack.
And I guess actually in the kind of the environment that we're kind of finding ourselves in right now, there's a real spotlight, arguably, on some of the kind of the information technology assets that are here, especially as we're all starting to utilize and consume those, perhaps more so than we would have done in even just a few weeks ago. Some interesting piece of research that I pulled out was that 35% of outages in CNI, or critical national infrastructure, are due to cyber attacks. Now, is that a figure that surprises you?
No, it's an easy target, to be honest. It's an invisible target. It's a target you can attack from anywhere. But that still doesn't tell the whole story. That tells the story on, really, we talk about outages, that's an availability threat. What about all the ones that are more subtle than that, where people are targeting information, slowly sucking things out, covertly exfiltrating data, or modifying systems, especially when we talk about kind of operational systems that aren't particularly well secured and are old and not very well controlled? Can I modify it slightly to make it do something it's not supposed to do? Would anybody notice? So no, that figure doesn't surprise me, but it still only tells half the story. Cyber is a big impact to lots of CNI environments.
And actually, that reminds me of kind of a bit of a segue subject, actually. But I was lucky enough to join one of your presentations just a few weeks ago when you spoke about a bit of a side experiment that you guys did around how secure yachts are, and it got me thinking that actually, there is still potentially this big disconnect between kind of the view of physical security and the view of cybersecurity, and I think the experiment you did around the kind of the connectivity of some pretty expensive assets was one that kind of underlined that point really quite well. So whether it's medical equipment that has an operating system bolted onto it, or it's a super yacht with a low-grade router, kind of that weakest link piece is something that is still often overlooked when people are looking at perhaps a slightly bigger prize. What just for the benefit of everyone tuning in, can you give us a bit more of an overview of what you did with that kind of super yacht experiment?
Yeah, so really we have been doing cyber protection for kind of maritime and the yachting environment for a few years. It's a standard IT, information technology, and OT operational technology environment where you've got historically segregated networks, and now they are one. That's the same issue you have in airports. Like airports, I would have thought that people would be spending the most money and protection effort on controls for the things that can damage planes, right? Compared to the IT stuff that general corporate users use. It's not the case. They spend the money on the easy stuff, which is protecting the corporate network. The IT elements of the physical platform, e.g. the planes, are not generally as well controlled or protected. Boats are the same. Boats have an IT network which is used for people looking at things on the internet. Whether things they're supposed to or not is a different question. Looking at things on the internet, plugging their iPhone in, guests using Wi-Fi, and that's the IT network. Right? Separately, you've got an IP-enabled connected network that runs the boat. engine management systems, navigation systems are all IP enabled, and historically they should be two completely separate networks. But they're not. They are all one network now. Whether there's one hole or 1,000 holes punched between the two sides is irrelevant. They're not very well controlled. So we did a test in Monaco Yacht Show late last year, which is where you'd think everyone's on their A game, lots of protection, and monitoring everything that's happening. What we found is the exact opposite. We found 600 odd Wi-Fi networks, 17 of which were secured. The rest were a mixture of using WEP, which we know is not particularly secure for a long time. Engine management systems visible to the internet without a password. Owners and yacht management crew, private networks in their bedroom visible to the internet with very weak passwords. And just generally no thought to security architecture. How would a bad guy do something? So we did this test, we came up with some stats and told everybody, and it's quite shocking, but those environments they're 20 odd years behind in their thinking of threat and response, behind the IT network, but they've got more of the risk, more of the threat, and should have a better response and more money spent in those areas. So yes, we did a test on the yachting environment, but we do that in lots of areas, and it's shocking. It's way behind, and it's easy for an attacker.
And it is incredible, isn't it? Because as more and more things get connected, the focus becomes on the kind of the more visible aspects, I get, but not necessarily the kind of the critical underlying piece. And you think of something like a super yacht, or indeed any kind of connected device, it's so reliant on technology to actually function correctly, that it's not just about the nice to haves of being able to plug your smartphones into that. It's actually critical functions of the system. So I found that a fascinating story when you shared it before, and it really starts to underline the point of kind of the depth and the breadth of what we're talking about when it's really critical national infrastructure type elements. I mean,
the big point for me is every environment you work in has got to go back to risk and threat level and impact. If having a conversation with anybody and saying, if I break into your Wi-Fi network and redirect where you're browsing to, that's bad. But is that bad when you compare it to, I can compromise your navigation system and sink your boat? Right? Yeah. When you compare two levels, and what you can do that in any level of CNI, in airports or other environments, compare two levels of risk from one side to the other. The OT side is way more impactful. And that's got to be brought back to standard, simple risk management, and to apply the right controls and cost in the right area.
And Steve, I notice you've popped up here, which can only mean one thing. You're raising your virtual hand to get in on the act as well. You must have a question.
Yeah, Mark, I was really interested to find out what types of attack do you think could compromise these types of environments? I mean, you spoke about a couple there, but I guess the list is endless, but what do you think are the main areas of kind of compromise for those types of environments?
Well, we talk about the kind of big high-profile power attacks that were customized malware specified to a specific environment. That's not what we see. In OT and CNI environments, they're not very well protected. They're not very well designed, they're not patched, they're not very well segregated, and they are not very well protected. So all the attacks, compromises, breaches we see on a daily basis are standard password attacks, standard clear text protocol compromises, brute force password attacks, redirection, employee suffocation. It's not complex. The attacker has spent a lot of time and effort crafting some clever attack. It's standard malware or compromise or exploit they've taken from the internet, messed around with it a bit, and they're trying it on. It's not, we don't see much, obviously, of very targeted attacks, because these easy ones will still work so well. And it's at the other side of it is it's harder for anybody to trace you if you use a standard attack known by everybody. If you use a completely customized malware sample you've made yourself, you've coded it, and it's very specific, it's going to entice people to come and try and backtrack and reverse engineer that and try and find you. If you're using standard exploits that have been around for years and you just find somewhere to apply that, then there is nothing to trace. Yes, they can try and find the source where you did it from, but if there's an open vulnerability, why go and craft something complex and new? So no, most of the attacks we see that are successful are standard. It's got a vulnerability, we didn't patch it. It's on the same network as my standard IT network, we didn't segregate it. It's got FTP and HTTP and SMB ports open, we didn't secure them and segregate them. It's standard attacks we've all known about for 20, 25 years, and we all know how to protect against them.
And we are starting to see a lot more stories emerge around the kind of the attack vectors or the impacts on critical national infrastructure. And I guess it kind of stands to reason as more and more things do become connected that perhaps were never intended to be connected in the first place. And I guess, you know, WannaCry is one of those that probably comes front of mind to anybody, whether they're in the industry or not, as one of the most famous attacks on CNI. And it had a particular impact on the National Health Service in the UK, but also the repercussions were felt around the globe as well. Steve, since you are still here and present, maybe you could give us a quick summary, because I know that Nominet played a role following this attack.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you say, WannaCry was probably the most famous ransomware that we've known over the years, because it hit the NHS, because it hit our critical national infrastructure. And I think we can only thank that that's not something that they're having to deal with right now, obviously. But WannaCry was some ransomware that's basically created, well documented now, that it was created by the North Koreans, and it used a known vulnerability. So as Mark just said, you know, most of these types of attacks leverage a known vulnerability, and this was in Microsoft Windows Server networks. So pretty standard for everyone to have these kind of networks, and it utilized the server message block as the vulnerability. Now, there was a patch out there for this, but as Mark said, lots of these types of networks aren't patched and aren't kept up to date, and therefore the ransomware leveraged that and managed to spread very quickly through networks, ransomware, and hold those networks to ransom. Now, one of the big things about WannaCry was, as part of its kind of attack chain, part of its kill chain, it called out to two particular domains to check whether these domains had been registered. And if the domains hadn't been registered, then it carried on as normal and encrypted all of the data across the network and activated itself. But if they were registered, then that was the kill chain, and it would effectively stop the ransomware from kicking in. Now, obviously, we've got some big customers, and we protect those from these types of attacks. And one of the things we were doing at that time was monitoring these networks for those two domains. So reviewing the DNS requests and seeing where those DNS requests came for those two particular domains. And by doing that, we could identify very early when those networks might have a problem. And we can obviously intervene and see it and block it at that network layer. Now, obviously, what we also quickly realized was, for these particular types of attacks, blocking was the incorrect thing to do. Actually, once that those domains had been registered and the kill switch was there, we wanted to let that through. We wanted it to connect to the domain and stop it from actually activating. But we also wanted to be aware of that, identify that this was happening, so we could let those organizations know and clear up their networks from the infections. Because lots of variants after that actually changed, so that if the domain was activated, it would also activate as well. They kind of reversed engineered it. So it was really important to keep on monitoring those networks and get to them as quickly as possible, so they could remediate and remove that infection.
And of course, the kind of the mitigation aspect is even more heightened when we're talking about critical national infrastructure. And another well-known CNI attack was one that was against a Ukrainian power grid. Yeah, Mark, from your perspective, I mean, it probably goes without saying, but what's the significance of a power grid going down?
Well, really, there are the obvious ones. People have not got power. You can't run transport and things like those that rely on power. So you've got a huge outage. The worry always is, though, that that's not the primary motive. In all of these things, somebody needs to sit there and think, as soon as something happens, when everybody else is running around trying to restore availability to systems, somebody's got to sit there and think, what's the motive? And try and decipher that motive, because it may, in a lot of the attacks, we see that there is an underlying motive to steal data, redirect, compromise, or do another type of attack. We're only seeing, we don't see a single attack such as, I want to take out the power anymore through a single attack vector. We see, I want to create a story of bad things that are going to happen through confusion and doing 8 different things at the same time, some to physical, some to IT, some to electronics, some to people, some to food. I'm going to do lots of things at the same time, potentially to compromise the system. So yes, power being out is an obvious issue to lots and lots of environments. You can't get messages out, you can't get telecommunications to work, you can't run health and emergency services. But for me, it's always think motive, are there underlying causes, what's somebody really trying to do?
And Steve, I see you've popped back up again, which can only mean one more thing.
Another question. I was really interested in your view, Mark, in terms of which types of industries that fall under CNI are most at risk. Do you see any particular patterns in the type of industry?
Well, for me, it's the non-obvious ones. Everybody knows people are going to attack energy and health and try and take those environments out. It's the non-obvious ones that people, if it were me and I was going to be the bad guy and do something, I would attack something that I don't think people are looking as much at. Water, I think, is a big one. And not only the actual utilities companies, think of the ongoing water supply chain and getting it to consumers. So bottled water, and I know it's not an issue right now because we're not there, but kind of water coolers that are in your offices, should they be part of CNI? Because you can impact lots and lots of people at the same time, which is the ultimate goal for some of the threat actors in there. So water, food, some of the things we've seen impacted right now as part of the kind of COVID issue. Other things that people would naturally target that aren't the ones you would think of. Finance is probably the most protected, with the most money spent and controls. We've got one of everything, and government and health. But it's the fringe ones around energy, water, that may not be as well protected. And there are lots of avenues for attack, and not necessarily lots of people thinking motive, and trying to put those blended threats together to work out is something bad happening.
So, I mean, it's an important issue, clearly, from what we've been talking about here, and it's one that perhaps, in some respects, hasn't got as much focus as arguably it should do. So I guess the obvious question is, how do we protect against an attack on CNI?
Well, really, it's about collaboration and applying this. It's not about designing new funky controls that we apply just for CNI environments over and above what we've got in the rest of industry. It's about using that best practice, segregation, standardized controls, monitoring and visibility of traffic and attack patterns, and trying to piece together, think attacker, think motive, is something bad going on right now. And that it rarely happens. Even when there is an incident, an outage, a breach, the first reaction for everybody is you almost always get it back online, get it back working. Right? Well, that might be the absolute worst thing you can do. Turn everything back on, make it faster, turn the speeds up, get more online, get more redundancy, more resiliency, if the bad guys can then do their bad thing quicker. So yes, standardized controls, standard network segregation, monitoring. Yes, everyone's trying to get rid of network boundaries and perimeter, but you still need it because these systems in CNI aren't very well protected. But the standard testing, patching, controls, segregation, as well as additional visibility of traffic out there. Now, one of the big issues, of course, is because everyone's so concerned about availability on CNI and operational technology platforms, but they don't test. When you run a security test or a penetration test against those platforms, you are specifically not allowed to do denial of service type testing. So anything that could take out the thing that is most at risk, you're not allowed to test against. And that's very common, right? So yes, we are protecting against the guy doing a very clever malware, and we're testing that you've got advanced monitoring, filtering, correlation controls, and threat intelligence, but we're not testing against, can somebody do a standard protocol attack, throw some bad traffic against something and make it go down? That's not the right approach, and that's what happens because there's too much reliance on, I'm going to get it in the neck if it goes down. I want to get it back up and running, and that's typical across CNI and commerce, standard commerce. And an underused tactic is when something goes wrong, turn it off. Right? There's always a massive reluctance to disable anything. Well, we just seen we can survive if we all go home and turn everything off and get out of the city and turn off transport. You can turn things off while you look at what is going on. It's quite a good response measure. No one uses it because they all think I'm going to get done more if it's down for longer. It's easier to quantify risk and ultimate cost of a breach through availability. So I'm going to be told that I've lost the company or the organisation hundreds of thousands or millions of pounds for every minute that it's down. But I think a sensible response to many of these attacks is turn it off, redirect traffic, inspect traffic. You've got much more chance of doing something if you're not trying to maintain availability in the midst of an attack.
Okay, well, thank you, Mark, because this is it's clearly an important subject, and it's one that actually, whether people recognise it or not, and hopefully perhaps more so from the discussion we've had now, it does actually impact everyone, and we are so reliant on those type of systems and services that you mention, and it shows that there is, there's a number of different complexities to consider in order to understand how to best deal or mitigate some of those attacks. So I really appreciate your insights on that. Kerry, let's have a quick view from the audience. Is there any questions come in?
Yeah, we've got some good ones, thank you. So Mark, do you think that there's enough consideration into the threats that could be caused by a supply chain for CNI organisations? And that's from Kate.
Sorry, supply chain, did you say?
Yeah, so the supply chain to the CNI organisation.
No, absolutely not. I mean, we've seen in the last week or so, people putting on LinkedIn, I can get you these things that we don't normally supply. Procurement departments trying to buy least cost from suppliers they don't usually use. We've personally seen devices, systems, and standardized IT kit compromised through supply chain and at source to get into an organization. We've seen that happen. It happens all the time. So the trust level in devices and equipment used and software used needs to go right back to source. Right? It's the same as the pharmaceutical industry. You need to know and chain of custody. You need to know where did every component of that machine go to, and know that it wasn't compromised in the middle of it. You can't go. We've seen in the last few weeks, send everybody home, go and buy 500 Dell laptops. Well, we can't get any from usual source, so let's just go and buy them on Amazon. You don't know how long somebody's been thinking about when can I get rid of these and how long they've been trying to compromise the components inside them. So no, supply chain protection is very rarely considered. When it is, it's pretty much can we do a third-party risk assessment on them? Can we get them to fill in a questionnaire? Usually at the most, but trying to source where the components come from, is it all trusted? Is it a trusted supply chain? And testing that is rarely considered.
Great, thank you. And then we have one from Joel. He asks, is there any advantages to being classed as CNI?
Any advantages to being classed as CNI? Well, you will get help and guidance to define your security architecture, define your response protocol, and if something happens, you will get assistance for some of the response. That brings with it some responsibilities to set yourselves up in a certain way and be checked and make sure you're doing the right things. But yes, being part of a CNI environment is good. You can share. There's much more information sharing between what would otherwise be competitors with certain individuals within CNI organisations, which is ultimately beneficial.
Great, thank you. And then finally, we have a question from Kathy asking, how worried do we need to be as a society in this current climate with a cyber attack on CNI?
Well, I wouldn't be any more worried than I am usually about an attack on CNI. If I were a threat actor, I would likely be thinking about doing the thing I've been planning for a long time now, because other things are going on. And as I said, we look for blended threats and threat vectors where people are doing a lot of things at the same time. But the landscape and the environment isn't much different than it was before. The things that are changing and are obviously different. Everybody's at home. Everybody's trying to connect in. You can't travel. You can't go and do anything. So taking out key bits of infrastructure, it's harder for people to go and try and fix those. I envisage an attack on local ISPs and communication systems. So if you can stop people doing things like this and get everybody getting online, then there's a big problem. People can't go to centralized places anymore. But we shouldn't be any more worried than we normally are. We've got a big thing to worry about with COVID. We don't need any more things to worry about at the same time.
Great, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the questions that came in today, and thank you very much for your insight as well, Mark. Clearly, this is a really important subject, and the clues in the title really, it is critical. So appreciate your viewpoint on that and sharing with us some of the work that you're doing at Infosec Partners as well. Just want to, before we wrap up the show, turn back to Kerry to give us a bit of a wash up of today's news. So back to you then, Kerry.
Great, thank you, Stuart. So ZDNet reports that 4 million Quid users have had their data shared on hacking forums. Quid is an online marketplace for trading stickers, cards, toys, and other collectibles. The passwords were secured with bcrypt hashing, which is considered notoriously hard to compromise, although some hackers have been trying to crack the password. There's also more discussion around privacy considerations that could be at odds with the efforts to use data to prevent the spread of COVID-19 in CNBC. And finally, CISO magazine reports that 60% of small businesses do not have a cybersecurity policy. The Cyber Readiness Institute found that 40% of businesses stated economic uncertainty was preventing them from making a security policy. And on the chat, we have a message from Gary Foote saying, Stuart, you should save some trees. And he's sent you a link to a nice post-it note app, which I will share with you after the show.
That will be gratefully received, so appreciate that. Thank you very much, Gary Foote. Well, that is it for today. Very special thanks to our guest today, Mark Oakton. Also, everyone here front of house and behind the scenes at 0 Days Live. To all of you for tuning in today. And don't forget, tomorrow we'll be joined by Richard Starnes, who's Chief Security Strategist of Capgemini. So please join us then. Have a great rest of the day. And from all of us here at 0 Days Live, take care and see you tomorrow.